It may feel like the names in history and their deeds are lost to time, but this couldn't be further from the truth, especially if we read some of the most historical librarians in history. In fact, the person I'm about to read is rumored to have died when a stack of books that he had collected fell on him. What this person was a true scholar. His name was Al-Jahiz. Al-Jahiz lists a bunch of names in his book, The Glory of the Blacks, where he writes down tens of names in which he says are black individuals who live amongst the Muslims. The reason he says this is because he finds it hypocritical that some of the Muslims around him look down on blacks when literally some of the earliest people that I have mentioned before in a video were companions of Muhammad, and the fact that they were jurists, scientists, and all kinds of noble people. Now, you probably wonder why I keep mentioning people like jurists and stuff like that, but that's because usually the thing that's most important in history is science. Wars can be fought over and over again, and no matter how great a warrior is, society barely changes because of them, at least for the positive. But if we look at scientists and technologists and all of this, in the future, they change everything quick. And when they do change, there is no reversing. So, what does he say about the people that he describes as black? Now, keep in mind, he does separate the different types of black people. As he states, there are bald people, these are the people of Africa, and then there are the Indians, and then there are black Arabs from Makkah and from Yemen, as we will see. When you see portrayals of Luqman the Wise, what you see is a classical Arab man talking to an Arab congregation. But this is a falsehood, because we know that even though Luqman was from Egypt, he was most certainly black. You will notice that people today call black people from Egypt Noba. This is to give the image that the black Egyptians are not actually Egyptians, but in fact Nubians. And I've done this mistake before. But this is what Al-Jahiz has to say about Luqman the Young in the qualities of the blacks. Among the blacks there is Luqman, the wise one, and it is him which said, there are three men who are known to us, only into three: he who preserves his control in anger, the courageous one in the face of danger, the friend when you need him. He gave his son the following advice: if you wish to remain with someone, make him angry before that. You will learn in advance if he is just and good. This is the only quote of him we regularly hear, because he had too many sayings to choose from. More important than this is that God called him the wise in the Quran, as well as his testament to his. He then mentions Sa'id ibn Jubair was also black. He got killed by Hajjaj at the age of 49. Half a year before Hajjaj himself died at the age of 53. It is said he was a very pious man, highly esteemed for his profound knowledge of the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, and a companion of Ibn Abbas. The Hadith scholars doubt even all Hadith who come from the companions of Ibn Abbas, except those of Sa'id ibn Jubair. His father was a Marwa of the Asid tribe, and said himself was a Marwa of the Umayyads. After he was killed, people felt a loss. If you don't know, the Umayyads are the people who went and took over all of North Africa except the Mauritanian areas, modern Mauritanian areas, and the other Sudanese regions, and then went and took over Spain and the Iberian areas. He mentions the world famous Bilal, the Ethiopian or Abyssinian, and he says, also among the blacks was the Ethiopian Bilal, may God be pleased with him, of whom Umar ibn al-Khattab, may God be pleased with him, said, Abu Bakr is our Lord, and he manumitted our Lord Bilal, while Abu Bakr yet comprised a third of the Muslim community. He then continues to list some warriors that were eventually immortalized in Islamic texts. The three that he mentions is Mihja, El-Migdad, El-Wanshi. Mihja is a former slave. El-Migdad was the guy who dyed his hair blonde even though he had dark skin. And then there's El-Wanshi, and the prophet named Mihja as one of the great three of Sudan.
We also find the narration where it said that the Prophet ﷺ, and this is in Al-Hakim, that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned Khayr Sudan, Thalatha, that the best of all black men and women are three: Luqman, Al-Hakim, Bilal, and Mihja, radiyallahu ta'ala anhum. So he is in the category of Luqman and Bilal, and of course there are multiple courses and books that you can go look up where the Prophet ﷺ talked about the specific forerunners of a people. So he counted Mihja radiallahu ta'ala anhu amongst the best of all black people in the category of Luqman and Bilal radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. So
as we read, Mihja, the first to die in the holy wars of the Prophet, El-Migdad, the first to fight in the holy wars as a horseman, El-Wanshi, who killed the false prophet Musaylima, known as the liar. He had the habit to say, I've murdered the best one of all men, meaning Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib. Now he names some black intellectuals. And another black, Makhul, the lawyer. And another black, Al-Haikutan, the poet, who was higher than the others through his personal judgment, his reason, and by the size of his insights. It is he who said in connection to friends, the friend is recognized when one shares intimacy of the heart and one accompanies one on a journey. One of the things that led to the Islamic Golden Age is the fact that they took scholarship so seriously. And you can see here, if you read the wording of the hadith as reported in Al-Jami as-Saghir is as follows: the ink of a scholar used in writing is weighed on the day of judgment with the blood of the martyrs, and the ink of the scholars outweighs the blood of the martyrs. And so that is a giant focus on education. Al-Jahiz continues and mentions the black Gulaybib, on whom the transmitter said, how the envoy of Allah, how the blessings and the safety of Allah are on him. Then he mentions Faraj, the barber surgeon, who was so just that he was often called by the judges for counsel. He was a freedom of Jafar ibn Suleiman. He was freed by Jafar ibn Suleiman. He then mentions El Hakatin, who was a Zanj. Not many Zanjas are written about in history, but here we have one, and we see the racism put upon him. As it says, when meeting people, he looks like the penis of a donkey wrapped in white paper. El Hakatin replied to him in a poem in which he said, though my hair is woolly and my skin black as coal, I am generous and my honor shines. My color does not prevent my being valiant with my sword in battle. Sounds like a threat. Abraha was an Axumite who is said to have come with an elephant to come and destroy the Kaaba and Mecca. And, something happened. But as we read, like the water birds when on them fall in a deserted country, the bird with the bent claws and the gray of color. If another than Allah had wished to push back Abraha, you would have noticed that one which has the most experience of men is closest to the facts. There is no claim to fame except that you will live opposite the sanctuary. Now, if you want to know what's going on, the Nagus, the person who was in charge of the Abyssinian Empire, took in refugees from the Islamic world, and because of this, he was claimed to be the noblest of the kings because all the other people refused the Muslims. Now, you're probably thinking I mentioned all the black people that I could have mentioned, but I did not. Al Jahiz goes on and mentions way more black people in this book, separating them from Zanj, Abyssinian, and so on. Some of them are actually really famous, having their own Wikipedia page to this day because they played a role outside of just Islam. I've really only mentioned about 30% of the people that he mentions in this book, and I hope I've painted the picture even better this time that Yemen and that area, Saudi Arabia, had a lot of black people.